So To the Abandoned Sacred Beast has wrapped up with its 12th episode, and I was unsure the direction they were going to take this week's episode because this is an ongoing manga, clearly couldn't wrap up the story unless they went anime original. I don't think they went anime original, but to me they did leave off on a satisfying point where you can kind of piece together where the story would unfold in the future, because of the relationship between Nancy and Hank that should he lose himself, or even if he does complete his mission, she would put him out if he was no longer human. So it just feels to me like the direction they took this episode, you did get the confrontation between Hank as well as Kane, you got some satisfying blows to the face, and you didn't speed past things that shouldn't have been sped past through. I honestly thought they might go the route, if they went anime original, maybe they would go the route of just they would find a way to win the war, Kane would be dealt with, all the incarnates would be dealt with, but no, we got a satisfying endgame battle while saying, this is an important person, there's no way that you could kill Kane at this point in time, especially if he's a vampire. So to me, they ended this show off on a point where, if we get another season, excellent, I'm going to watch it, I'm going to review it, that would be great. However, if it had to leave off here, I don't feel the need to go read the manga, or do I feel like I was cheated in any way, which is a rare thing nowadays, especially for series like these. It usually is just that commercial to go read the manga, but for me, it honestly felt like I had a satisfying adventure, which is all I could really ask for. To me, this series has been so interesting because if you really look at this episode in particular, the ideologies and just mentalities for Kane and Hank are so interesting. And what I really love is how Nancy incorporated herself into this episode without actually lifting a finger besides, catching Hank when he was about to fall down. I really like what this episode did because during episode 1, I thought maybe there was romantic tension or something with Elaine, Kane, and Hank, but it is just this hatred for humanity because they were worshipped as gods on the battlefield. They were literally revered as gods. The bullets that kill them are called god killer bullets. Kane got into this mentality that he was literally a god and he deserved to kind of go over humanity because humans will say how they would cause anything that would be worse than any war, but look at what they created. Humans are just these vile and corrupt creatures, so why should they get to choose when judgment is passed when they do all these vile things? Where with Hank, he says, yes, but humans do try to correct their actions. And it's so interesting where Kane bought into the god mentality, Hank's bought into the human mentality. However, if Nancy wasn't here, there was a moment in this episode that really gave me the impression that if Nancy wasn't there and Kane was saying, come over to my side, he was really trying to sell Hank that he doesn't need to die here. These humans are to blame, not us. The humans are. And I honestly think if Hank would have been walking alone, he would have joined Kane. But because Nancy was there and Nancy believes he's a human, he didn't lose himself to the mindset of Kane, and that's why I really like this episode, and really the relationship between this protagonist and antagonist, because it really felt like a contrast of someone who believes they were a god and someone who believes they were a beast, but then eventually convinced himself was a human because of the companion that he kept. That's why this episode was so satisfying to me, because you really did get something emotionally gripping for this endgame battle. Kane didn't go out, he did get his face pummeled in, which was incredibly satisfying, but that wasn't enough to take him out, which I'm really happy for, because the way they directed it, you would think, okay, this is like a Dragon Ball Z power-up move, but it was more spectacle than anything, and just the resolve to see it through to the end. That wasn't enough to kill him, it was more just to set him straight, and once you see that the North won, it's like, well, he had to pull back for now. There was still a shit ton of incarnates left, there was no way to go anime original and wrap it up. However, you can end off in the manga at some point where, Nancy and Hank, they set off on their next adventure knowing that they're going to continue on the path that we saw with this season. There's going to be eventually a battle with Kane, and that's just satisfying to me. I really don't feel like it ended in a way that it feels like Blue Balls, right? It doesn't feel like they dragged us along to give us no satisfying payoff. We got that development with Hank and Nancy, where if Hank was to lose himself, Nancy would kill him, and she is really that shoulder to lean on to keep him on the humanity path. So you feel like he could see his adventure through to the end, and Kane's gonna stir up trouble. He has the biggest land at this point in time. The lands that we were fighting for really are the weaklings at this point in time, so there definitely would be hardships, and there's a lot of room for more story, which is why I'm not surprised the manga is still ongoing, and there's still another 28 or something chapters that haven't been adapted, and the manga is still going. But for me, it really just felt like, yeah, this is a good stopping point. After the credits there, you get the confirmation that those feet that I think it was in the second or third episode, it kind of hinted at that there was a lane in a test tube. 100% confirmed, and he's just basically keeping her alive to mock her as he basically goes for world domination, kind of rubbing salt into the wounds of a girl who wanted to correct her mistakes, and that's ultimately why Hank kind of set off on that path, because he realized that she really did have the right mindset with what she was going to do, take the blame and make sure the problem would be solved. So that's why I ultimately like this series and episode overall. Honestly felt like payoff. Not everyone's going to agree, and that's perfectly fine. There's going to be manga readers who may not enjoy the adaptation. There's going to be anime originals who want to say it's shallow and it was one note or it didn't have a lot of depth, but when you really break down what the characters were doing, and I especially like the resolve from Claude in this episode, who was honestly a character who I thought was a fun addition but didn't really add anything that emotionally gripping in comparison to, say, Hank or even Nancy herself. But when you see just his, resolve and anger to attack his brother, I felt like they actually got across a lot of emotion through very simple words and just actions, and to just see how close he was to dying before Hank came in, I really liked that scene overall. Though I will say, even though I was predicting that the Colonel was going to do something, I wasn't expecting the poison whatsoever. The Hydra's poison to come in and not only to betray Hank, but to betray your fellow men. Now, you can't deny that this mindset probably would have been the right one to go up against someone like Kane, but man, was that twisted, and to see him get killed for that was actually pretty satisfying, I'm not gonna lie. We have vampires, we got zombies rising up from the grave sort of a situation, how are you supposed to deal with incarnates who are like that? And that is one thing I'm kind of curious about going in the future. How would they finally defeat a vampire? I think that would be pretty cool, besides poison and things like that. Maybe they'll have to make more military grade weaponry to kind of deal with Kane and his incarnates, but to just see the brutality of that poison sinking through a vampire-like incarnate who has immortality was completely brutal. It was savage. That's what it was. I was expecting the betrayal. I talked about it last week. But the Hydra's poison was not something I was expecting, but then to see Kane turn him into a vampire-like creature to then put the poison in his mouth, the irony and just the way Kane's mindset works is something that you gotta kind of appreciate, right? It just felt like this episode, it actually did quite a lot. If you really take the pacing of this season, you could definitely extend it to 18 episodes, and it probably would have felt a lot more fleshed out. However, with that said, I don't think the pacing was so bad that it ruined what it went for. I do feel like we grew with Hank, we grew with Nancy, we got a decent understanding of the military and just world overall. We got some great development with Kane and just his actual mindset towards Elaine and Hank and why he's so bound and bent on being like this god. So I felt like the main characters they had to nail, they did nail. They got it down correctly, and it made it feel like they were fleshed out. Obviously, there's a lot of side elements and side characters that could have used more polishing and things like that, and the production wasn't some top-notch A+ production where you look at the visuals and you can screen cap at any moment and say this is wallpaper quality, but it did feel like this was better than an average series like some people want to call it. I actually felt like this was a gripping series, a great world, a great narrative, interesting characters, and when they did have to go flashy, I think they definitely did, especially seen by some of the stuff Hank did in this episode. There was some great animation and just still frames overall. I felt like the voice actors really got into their role. I think Nancy, once again, as well as Hank, really stole the show. But I can't deny Kane in this episode. Holy shit, this man, he really didn't feel like he was some lunatic villain. He felt like he has been wronged and this is the correct outcome, and he wanted his friend to come back to him instead of siding with humans like he always did throughout the war. It just felt like, even though a lot of people on the internet want to write it off as a nothing show or an average show, it felt like the people behind the show, they believed in it, and I think for me, the quality shows in it. Obviously, it's not going to be anyone's anime of the season, or maybe it'll be very few people's anime of the season, but it is something I'm not going to be forgetting anytime soon. If they confirm another season, I'm going to be watching it, I'm going to be reviewing it. I don't care how popular it is. I like this show a whole lot, and it was memorable. I thought it had potential at episode 1, episode 2 and 3. I was like, okay, I really see the potential in this. And leaving episode 12, I feel like I had a satisfying adventure with more positive thoughts than negative ones, and that's all I ultimately asked for. If there's one thing I'm going to remember the most when I think about this series, it's ultimately going to be the bond between our central lead characters. And I think that's why I have such a positive thought process on this show, because Nancy and Hank, they easily could have failed, they easily could have been generic and cliche, but they fit into the story in an interesting way, in a unique way, and they both helped one another to find their purpose in the world, and I feel like that's why this show feels so special to me, because I really do like the character writing behind those two, and when you look at everything else, even though it's not really comparable to, say, their relationship, I do feel as if it just is extra spices and just things to make the flavor of the show feel even better, so it's not some plain average dinner that we're eating like some people want to pass it off as. To me, it does feel like something that is memorable and special from this season, which will easily be overlooked because of how popular this season is and how many, big hit shows there are, but I thought this was a great anime. I mean, obviously, I've said so for about 12 weeks at this point in time. Definitely will be doing a big video, probably a full review in the future, maybe a month or so from now, but definitely look forward to that. If you did enjoy these episodic reviews, deep dive this in some way, shape, or form, probably try to avoid any spoilers to maybe sell more people on the show, because I definitely like this a whole lot. But what did everyone think? For manga readers, anime originals like myself, what do you think of episode 12, the final episode of To the Abandoned Sacred Beast? Let me know down in that comment section below. If you did enjoy this video though, be sure to drop a like, and also hit that subscribe button if you have been new. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.